I'm Barbara, and if you have a moment, I'd like to share a story with you that explores love, treachery, and the struggle for self-respect. Let me set the scene and introduce you to the actors of my little drama before we go too far into it. My name is Barbara, and I was born into what many would consider privilege, a silver spoon, and all that. However, I was brought up to value hard effort above freebies, even with the squishy beginning. My dad, a self-made entrepreneur who transformed a niche into an empire, is the king of the engine additive industry. Mom is also no slouch. She started a beauty business from the bottom up and has made her brand synonymous with fashion. Even though their divorce when I was 19 could have been nasty, they managed to keep it elegant by dividing everything evenly and yet remaining friends. Mom remarried, but she didn't have any more children beyond me. And Dad remained single, happy with his career in bachelorhood. Let me introduce you to Jake, my spouse, or as I now consider him, the driving force behind my personal turmoil. After I found a job teaching music to youngsters who had more enthusiasm than common sense, I got married right out of college. Up until we had a hiccup in the road, life seemed fairly good. As soon as I became pregnant, Jake's true nature became apparent. Jake gently threw the grenade into our lives one lazy Sunday as he was stretched out on the couch with his feet up. "Why don't you just leave your work and stay at home with the baby, Barbara, sweetie? We'll get by." I almost choked on my tea. "Stop working. Jake, you are aware that we cannot pay for it with only your pay. In addition, I enjoy my job." A sneer played on his lips as he dismissed it with a sweep of his hand. "Come on, Em, we're not just any people. Your dad is loaded. We'll be okay with a little assistance from him." My blood began to boil. "Jake, that's not the point. I'm not using my parents' fortune to support us on a daily basis. Living within our means was our agreement." Jake, however, wouldn't let it go. He brought it up again at dinner, in front of his parents, no less. "Barbara's considering taking some time off work, with the baby coming and all." Carol, his mother, who had a keen sense of advantage and a sharp tongue, jumped in. "Oh, that's fantastic. You two don't need to worry about anything when you're with Barbara's family." In an attempt to maintain my composure, I slightly tightened my grip on my fork. "Actually, we haven't decided anything, and we intend to manage on our own. Thank you." Frank, Jake's father, who never misses a beat, added a laugh. "Barbara, why take the difficult road? You could be living comfortably with a little assistance from your parents. Why throw away that chance?" From then, Jake and his parents painted elaborate portraits of a life spent on my parents' cash, and the conversation took a turn for the worst. Each utterance seemed like a betrayal, further entangling the knife. They saw a ticket to a simple life, not me. As I lay in bed with Jake that night, I couldn't get rid of the loneliness. "Jake, do you really think we should be relying on my parents like that?" Hoping for some indication that I had misinterpreted the situation, I muttered. With those eyes that used to melt my heart, he turned over and faced me. "Barbara, it's about what's clever, not about need. We deserve a break, and your parents can afford it. Why not accept it?" Deserve. Long after Jake had fallen asleep, the word continued to reverberate in my mind. We were obviously following distinct pathways and holding different beliefs. I awoke and gazed at the ceiling, wondering how I had failed to see the indications and where we would go next. I had the hope that we would reconcile after our initial argument with Jake around money and pride. Oh, I was mistaken. With their own unique brand of mayhem, the in-laws take center stage. Jake's parents weren't exactly the epitome of independence. My family's affluence was like a beacon to them, and they had a knack of spotting a free dinner from a great distance. Frank was talking endlessly about this great business possibility that just required a minimal investment to get off the ground one evening when we were all gathered in our small living room. "So Barbara, darling," Carol begins, her voice brimming with that cavity-causing phony sweetness, "I bet you could easily help us out with your family's resources." It is really certain I truly tried to remain calm. I've told you before, Carol and Frank, we're handling our money on our own. This isn't about my parents' finances. However, Frank has the perseverance of a door-to-door salesperson. Don't worry, Barbara, you wouldn't feel it. To your dad, what are a few thousand? In a weekend, he most likely spends that on golf. I was astounded by the boldness. They had the audacity to treat my family's hard-earned money like it was theirs to take while they were sitting in our house and eating our meals. Jake attempts to act as a mediator. Maybe they're right, isn't it only a loan? We could support our family. Family. The term nearly choked me. Jake, when did we decide it's our job to bankroll your parents' dreams? The room became quite chilly. Carol, who never lets a dramatic occasion pass unexploited, said, "Well, I never." Here we assumed that family members supported one another. But if you're going to be frugal. Stingy. I was flushed now. Caroline, working for what you have isn't being frugal. It's known as responsibility. Perhaps you ought to give it a go sometime. Despite Frank's best efforts, the harm had already been done. Look, Barbara, don't be angry. We are only conversing here. Talking, right, I couldn't hide my sarcasm. Seems like all we ever do is talk about how my family can solve your problems. That night, after they finally left, with Jake apologizing for his parents' misunderstanding, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling. It wasn't just a misunderstanding. It was a full-on invasion of our lives by two people who saw me not as a daughter-in-law, but as a walking, talking ATM. After our little Lily came into this world, life took a turn I didn't quite expect. You'd think the arrival of a grandchild would bring out the best in people, right? Well, not so much with Jake's folks. They showed up at the hospital with what had to be the cheapest onesie from the discount bin. It still had the clearance sticker on it. But when my folks came through with a beautiful hand-knit blanket and some top-notch baby gear, you'd have thought World War IV was about to break out in that hospital room. Wow, really laying it on thick, aren't they? Carol quipped, eyeing the gifts with a mix of disdain and envy. Must be nice to just throw money around. Bet they could have just gotten you a house instead of all this fluff. Jake chimed in with a chuckle. Yeah, Mom's got a point, Your folks sure don't hold back. A house might have been more practical, huh? My heart sank. Here I was, holding our newborn, and all they could talk about was how my parents should have spent their money. It stung, hearing Jake echo his mom's words. Was our daughter just a dollar sign to them? I tried to keep the peace, biting back my growing anger. Well, it's not about the price tag, right? It's the thought that counts. But Frank wasn't about to let it go. Oh, sure, but when you think about it, a nice little investment in property. Now that's a gift that keeps on giving. The ride home from the hospital was tense. Jake tried to smooth things over, saying his parents were just old-fashioned and didn't mean anything by it. But the seed was planted. Doubt started creeping in about why Jake really married me. Was it love, or was my family's bank account the main attraction? A few weeks later, during one of their unsolicited visits, Carol brought it up again. We were all crammed in our living room, Lily fussing in my arms, and Carol couldn't resist a jab at the new stroller my mom had bought us. Must be nice having your folks shower Lily with all these expensive toys and gadgets. Though a contribution to a house fund would have been more useful, don't you think? she said, her voice dripping with that passive-aggressive tone I'd come to dread. Jake, sitting beside his mom, nodded. Actually, babe, we've been talking. Maybe your parents could help us out with a down payment instead of more baby stuff. Makes sense, right? I was floored. Not only were Jake's parents relentless, but now Jake was on board with turning our daughter's birth into a bargaining chip for financial gain. It felt like I was living in some twisted reality where love and family meant less than material wealth. Is that what this is about for you, Jake? Using my parents for money? I couldn't hide the hurt in my voice. I thought we were in this together, for better or worse, not for richer or poorer. Jake looked taken aback, but Carol just sniffed. Well, when your wife's parents are rich, it's only practical to think about these things. After they finally left, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, Lily asleep beside me. The realization hit me hard. My marriage, my family, it all felt like a transaction to them, and I was the currency. The last few years have been a roller coaster, to say the least. Lily's grown into a fiery little 3-year-old full of life and laughter. But life threw us some curveballs I never saw coming. First, it was Mom. The accident was sudden, a shock to all of us. I was drowning in grief, barely keeping it together for Lily. But Jake, his first question wasn't about how I was holding up. No, it was, so how much are you getting from your mom's will? It felt like a slap in the face. My mom wasn't even cold, and here he was, eyeing her legacy like a vulture. According to Mom's will, I inherited the barber shop chain. I knew nothing about running a business, but Jake was quick to offer his expertise. Babe, let me handle this. You know I've got a knack for business, he said, all confidence and smiles. I was too lost in my grief to argue, so I let him take the reins, though I made sure the ownership papers stayed in my name. I thought maybe, just maybe, he could turn things around for us. Then barely a year later, Dad passed away from a heart attack. Losing both my parents in such a short time broke something in me. I needed Jake more than ever, but all he could talk about was what we'd inherit from Dad. The day after Dad's death, Jake's parents came over. I expected maybe a shred of decency, a moment of respect for my loss. But no, they dove straight into speculations about Dad's wealth. So Barbara, must be a hefty sum coming your way, huh? Frank said, barely able to contain his glee. I saw red. Can you not, for once, just stop talking about money? I shouted, the words exploding out of me like shrapnel. Carol put on her best offended face. Well, I never. We're just concerned about the family's future. No need to be rude. Jake tried to play peacemaker as always. And they're just curious. It's a big deal, you know. A big deal. I echoed, my voice rising. My parents are gone. Jake and all you and your parents can think about is cashing in. Is that all I am to you? A bank? The room fell silent. The tension was thick enough to cut with a knife. Jake looked at me, then at his parents, and mumbled some half-hearted apology, but the damage was done. I couldn't stand the sight of them. Their greed, their complete lack of empathy. Get out, I said, my voice steady but cold. They left, Carol muttering under her breath, Frank with a scowl. Jake lingered, trying to justify his parents' behavior, but I was done listening. 2 days after my dad died, Jake came bouncing through the doorway earlier than usual. Babe, I've got awesome news, he beamed, barely containing his excitement. I struck a deal to sell the hairdresser chain. Can you believe it? My jaw nearly hit the floor. What? You did what? Without even asking me. I was fuming, feeling a mix of betrayal and disbelief. Before we could really dive into it, his folks showed up, ready to party like we'd hit the jackpot. They brought in a feast from some fancy restaurant and a bunch of bottles that screamed high roller. Carol was all smiles, waving those bottles in my face. Guess what, honey? We sold the old condo and put down a deposit on a beach house. We're all moving to the coast. I stared at her, feeling like I was trapped in some bad dream. Hold on, you what? Nobody asked me about moving. I don't want to live by the beach, with all that humidity and the winds, with a kid. Are you out of your mind? Carol just waved off my concerns like I was talking about the weather. Oh, don't you worry about that. We've also booked a cruise. You should come with us. It'll be fabulous. Where's this money coming from? I asked, my patience wearing thin. Well, darling, with your father's passing and the sale of the salons, money's no object now. We're set for life. Think about it. Yachts, private jets. We're living the dream. Carol's eyes were practically sparkling with dollar signs. I turned to Jake, utterly dumbfounded. Why are we even talking about selling my mom's business again? And what's this nonsense about being set for life? Babe, it makes sense. Managing both businesses will be too much. We've got to focus on what's more profitable. It's for our future, for our daughter's future. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. The greed, the audacity, it was all too much. Show me the financials for the salon, I demanded. I want to see everything before we make any rash decisions. Jake squirmed, avoiding eye contact. Look, it's all about our future, about making sure we're comfortable. His parents joined the chorus, pressing me to just let go and enjoy the windfall. But looking at them, all I could see were vultures circling. Why the rush to sell the hairdresser shops again? I pressed, needing answers. Jake shrugged, the picture of Fox reason. Look, babe, after your dad's gone, juggling both businesses just doesn't make sense. We've got to focus on what brings in more dough. The car oil thing is a gold mine compared to the salons. His folks perked up at this, chiming in with their 2 cents. Darling, think about it. Selling those little shops could give you a life of luxury. Why waste your time on them? His mom's voice dripped with greed. The sight of them practically salivating over my inheritance made my skin crawl. I want you to leave now, I said, my voice firm, my resolve stronger. This is a time to mourn my father, not feast on what he left behind. Jake tried to interrupt, but I cut him off. And another thing, this is my inheritance we're talking about. Mine, you and your parents have no say in this. The air turned icy as they realized I wasn't the pushover they thought I was. With heavy steps and heavier scowls, they left, leaving me to ponder the lonely battle ahead. The dawn after my father's funeral found me in a fog of grief, the world around me dimmed to a monotonous gray. That's when Jake decided to inject his version of color back into our lives. Over a breakfast that tasted like cardboard, he launched into his agenda. We need to call a meeting with the founders of your father's company. Pronto, Jake stated, his voice slicing through the quiet like a knife. I paused, a piece of toast halfway to my mouth, and stared at him. Jake, my father has just been buried. Can't this wait? I need some time to process everything. He waved off my concerns with a flick of his hand. Time is money, babe. We need to act fast. Frustrated and seeking clarity, I reached out to our family lawyer, asking for a breakdown of the barber shop chain's status and a primer on my father's business dealings. Information I hoped would give me some ground to stand on. A month went by in a blur of legal jargon and financial statements until Jake, accompanied by his parents, descended upon our house once more, each of them bursting with unsolicited advice and greed-laden suggestions. Without so much as a hello, Jake dove right in. You know, I've been thinking. I'm the right man to lead your dad's company. The audacity of his claim left me speechless, but he wasn't done. "And I'll need a new car, something that screams business mogul. The latest BMW should do the trick." Before I could even muster a response, Carol chimed in with her own outrageous demands. "The coastal house is nearly ready. We just need to throw in another $300,000, plus some for furniture. And dear, I expect you to set up an account for me. I need to maintain my lifestyle after all." After listening to their endless demands, I knew what I had to do. It was like a switch flipped inside me. No more Mrs. Nice Gal. Clutching the divorce papers like a shield, I stepped forward, interrupting their chatter. "Jake, we need to talk," I announced, placing the papers before him on the coffee table. He picked them up, a frown creasing his forehead. "What's this, Sam?" His attempt at nonchalance couldn't hide the tremor in his voice. "Divorce papers," I stated, every word deliberate. "I've had the business audited, Jake. You've run it into the ground. It's teetering on the edge of ruin because of your management." His face drained of color, a guilty child caught in a lie. "I was trying to make it better," he stammered, his excuses as flimsy as his confidence. "Make it better?" "By firing our most talented staff and neglecting the core of what made the business succeed." My voice rose, fueled by a cocktail of anger and betrayal. Carol, ever the meddler, couldn't resist intervening. "No, dear, let's remember he's entitled to half of everything. Marriage binds assets, after all." I couldn't help but laugh, though there was no joy in it. "Nice try, but everything's been in my name since before I made the colossal mistake of marrying your son. He gets nothing from me." The room went silent. They were stunned, their grand schemes shattering around them. I turned to Jake, adding, "And another thing. You're going to pay back every penny you've cost the business. Every single penny." When the reality of the divorce finally hit Jake, his reaction was to desperately grovel, pleading with me to reconsider. "Please, can't we talk about this?" "There has to be another way," he begged, his voice cracking with desperation. Not to be outdone in the drama department, his parents launched into their own tearful performance. They lamented about sinking all their funds into the coastal house, a property now hanging by a thread without the next installment. "We're going to lose everything," his mother sobbed, her tears flowing freely. "Please think of what this means for us." I listened, my heart hardened by their previous actions, feeling nothing but a detached coldness toward their plight. "Sorry, but that's your mess," I stated, my tone unwavering. With newfound resolve, I guided them to the door, closing it, and that chapter of my life behind them. In the days that followed, I didn't allow myself to dwell on the past. Instead, I focused on the future, selling the apartment that Jake and I once shared. The sale provided just enough for a quaint, welcoming house that promised a new beginning for my daughter and me. Stepping into our new home, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders, a sense of peace enveloping us in a way that had been missing for too long. The wheels of justice turned slowly but surely, and when they finally caught up with Jake, he was ordered to compensate for the turmoil he'd inflicted on the hairdresser chain. The courts determined that his recklessness had a price, and he was forced to liquidate his share of our old apartment to meet his financial obligations. Watching him be held accountable for once felt like a bittersweet vindication for the hardship he put us through. Out of nowhere, my phone rang one day. On the other end was my former mother-in-law, her voice laced with desperation. "We're in a bind. We need help to buy a place. Any amount would help," she pleaded, her audacity leaving me incredulous. I took a deep breath, collecting my thoughts before responding. "You made your bed," I replied, my tone steady and resolute. "It's time you lie in it." Ending the call, a mix of emotions washed over me. Anger at their continued sense of entitlement, but also a profound sense of freedom from their clutches. Life eventually began to improve after everything that transpired, including the divorce and the struggle to regain control of my mom's hair salon business. Although it was a difficult ascent, the salons eventually started to rediscover their former luster. It was a triumph to get back the best stylists we had lost. It was like seeing the building come to life again as they walked back through those doors, prepared to work their magic on our seats. As it happened, I was better suited for the corporate world than I had thought. Every day was a fresh lesson and a revelation about my potential. I might not have discovered this aspect of myself if I hadn't been trapped by life's brutal turn. Another challenge was managing my dad's auto oil company. I made the decision to hire a manager to guide the ship for the time being while I regained my bearings. I told him, "It's all yours for now, but keep me in the loop," to make it obvious that I was still in command. If Lily is interested, I'm considering giving it to her when she's old enough, perhaps around 20. I want her to be able to make her own decisions. I'm learning the ropes and dipping my toes in the meanwhile. A world removed from the chaos we had left behind, our new house, which was just Lily and I, was a peaceful refuge. Although it was little, it was ours. A space where we could develop, recover, and create something new. Every nook held a memory we were creating together, and every corner was brimming with laughter. Lily's laughing in the garden was a comfort to my spirit. With awe and respect in her eyes, she would declare, "Mommy, when I grow up, I want to be just like you." I would reply, "You're going to be even more amazing," and embrace her. I had a gut feeling that something amazing was about to happen. We were unstoppable as a team, prepared to face whatever was ahead with open arms and optimistic hearts.